Year six. I hope you're well. You've had a good weekend. You're all on the ball, and you spotted, like Mr. Spring has, as soon as he's opened his slides, it says Tuesday, and it's actually Monday. So I'm sorry, guys. I've made a mistake before I've even begun. It's Monday. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Today, within our reading, we're going to be reading chapter 6 of Private Peaceful. As part of that, we're going to try and work on the skill of retrieving, so pulling information out. Retrieve's a great word. Think of the spelling. Retrieving of that information from it. We're going to think about what the question's asking. We're going to look at the key words within the question. Also, we're going to scan that text and look really carefully for those trigger words which prompt us to look down within the text. And then we're going to support our answer with evidence, potentially a quotation from the text. It doesn't have to be a quotation, but as long as we've got some fact, figures, or names, we'll have some evidence. Okay, guys. Now, today, it's down on page 77. Just with these first paragraphs, I wonder if you're starting to get a feeling about what's happened. Okay, so I say first paragraphs, first two paragraphs. So each chapter opens with this little point, doesn't it? And each chapter opens with this idea of the narrator is in a different time zone to when the book of the story happens. In this part, there's a sliver of moon out there, a new moon. I wonder if they're looking at it back home. Bertha used to howl at the moon, I remember. If I had a coin in my pocket, I'd turn it over and make a wish. When I was young, I really believed in all those old tales. I wish I still could believe in them, but I mustn't think like that. It's no good wishing for the moon, no good wishing for the impossible. Don't wish, Tomo. Remember, remembrances are real. I find this really haunting, quite sad, because it's got this idea that Tomo, wherever he is now, and as we're kind of getting there, aren't we? We're understanding that the war's coming. We're thinking maybe where he might be, but wherever he might be in these opening two paragraphs, he's obviously not happy. He doesn't want to wish for the future. He can only think of the past. Don't wish, Tomo. Remember, remembrances are real. So he wants to think back to the past, but he doesn't want to think to the future. So whatever's in front of him, whatever's ahead of him, is not something he wants to look towards. All he wants to consider is that which has happened. So the happiness is behind him. Other things lie ahead. I find that really sad, but really, really affecting as well. And again, as we've talked about before, as a writer in narratives particularly, sometimes a word for a sentence really punches the reader. Remember. And also this conversation with himself, don't wish, Tomo. He's trying to implore himself not to do something. We buried Bertha. And now we go into the more conventional bit of the narrative, the story that's happening in the past, as the narrator's telling us. We buried Bertha the same day, where Big Joe always buried his creatures, where the mouse had been buried at the bottom of the orchard. But this time we said no flowers. We said no prayers. We laid no flowers. We sang no hymns. Somehow none of us had the heart for it. Perhaps we were all too angry to grieve. Walking back through the trees afterwards, Big Joe was pointing upwards and asking Mother if Bertha was up in heaven now with Father. Mother said that she was. Then Big Joe asked if we all go to heaven after we die. Not the Colonel, muttered Charlie. Can see now this disdain, this dislike that these characters have for the Colonel is really, really pronounced. They don't care for him. They don't love him at all. They don't respect him. They wish that he didn't go to heaven. If you believe in heaven, if you're somebody of faith, then the antonym, the opposite of heaven, is obviously hell. Okay, and Charlie doesn't believe that the Colonel's going there. He believes that his actions are prompting him to go to hell. If we look at our vocabulary work then for this page, we're thinking about orchard. And as we're thinking about orchard, we're thinking about what synonyms and antonyms are. So we've got some synonyms and antonyms at the bottom. But the way we'd find those is by looking at the section where the word orchard appears. So within that sentence, I can see that we buried Bertha the same day. So it's a ground area where you've got ground, where Joe always buried his creatures, where the mouse had been buried at the bottom of the orchard. Okay, so we've got this idea there that it's somewhere that you can dig up because you can bury things. Okay. Now I know about orchards because I've heard about them in my wider reading, and lots of you would have known that the word orchard is synonymous with woods where you grow trees, or coppices where you grow trees. It's the antonym. It's the opposite of somewhere where there's no trees. It's the antonym of somewhere like a clearing or a field. And we can see this section. Sorry, my face is in the way. We can see the section about where the word orchard appears, how he always buried his creatures. This is an important element to remember for later, because that idea of always burying creatures tells us something about Joe, how frequently he's burying things. Okay. Within orchard, it's two syllables, so orchard. Okay, two syllables. It's a piece of enclosed land, so it's land which isn't open, but it's closed in. So it's almost like it's owned by one person. It's enclosed and it's planted with fruit trees. So to technically be an orchard, you need to have fruit trees, whether they're apples or other types of fruit within them. It can't just be any old tree. It needs to be trees which are growing fruit. Um, and you could say, as a piece of usage, you could open with hungry for food. Animals sometimes forage, so they sometimes go looking in orchards, okay, because they know that food will drop on the floor and they can eat it. Right, guys, carrying on then to page 78. We've now learned about how Charlie's feeling about the Colonel. We knew it already, but it's really stark, isn't it? Not the Colonel, Charlie mutters. He'll go downstairs where he belongs, where he'll burn. Mother darted a reproving glance at him for that. So that reproving glance, she's not telling him off, but she's looking at him like he's gone too far. She's making the point that however they think ill of the Colonel, they shouldn't be wishing somebody to go to hell. Mother darted a reproving glance at him for that. Yes, Joe, she went on, her arm around him. Birds up in heaven. She's happy now. That evening, Big Joe went missing. Again, a short sentence with a lot of power. Big Joe went missing. For many characters, nearly adult age, or as we know, I think Big Joe is an adult of age, them going missing wouldn't be concerning. But because we know that Big Joe doesn't understand the world in which he lives, we know it's a real concern. So we know it's a punchy sentence. That evening, Big Joe went missing. None of us was that worried. Not at first, not while it was still light. Big Joe would often go wandering off on his own from time to time. He'd always done that, but never at night, because Big Joe was frightened of the dark. Our first thought was to look down in the orchard by Bertha's grave, but he wasn't there. We called, but he didn't come. So, as darkness fell and he still had not come home, we knew there was something wrong. Mother sent Charlie and me out in different directions. I went down the lane calling for him all the way. I went as far as the brook where I stood and listened for him, for his heavy stomping tread, for his singing. And I love those bits. That even when we're describing somebody being lost, we're still getting that insight into the character. He's a character who doesn't just walk around gently; he stomps. That lack of awareness of other people showing through Joe again, and he's singing. So it's not really normal as an adult to walk around singing. Okay, he's singing. He sang differently when he was frightened. No tunes or songs, but instead a continuous wailing drone. But there was no drone to be heard, only the running of the brook, which always sounded louder at night. I knew Big Joe must be very frightened, for it was by now quite dark. I made my way home, hoping against hope that either mother or father, Charlie or mother, might have found him. As I came into the house, I could see neither of them had. They looked up hopefully at me as I came in. I shook my head. And that's a way of showing that they haven't found him. Because if you look up hopefully, you're hoping somebody else has achieved something that you haven't got. The vocabulary here is the the phrase wandering off. So wandering off. And then again, what we do as a reader, we look around the area where it is. So none of us was that worried, not at first, not while it was still light. Big Joe would often go wandering off on his own from time to time, and always done that, but never at night because Big Joe was afraid of the dark, or was frightened of the dark. So if we look at bit wandering off, is that a verb? What kind of language is it? We circle that. How many syllables are within that phrase? How would you define it? Where's the quotation? So this is the part that you've got to fill in. Can you use it in a sentence about one of your characters from your Just So stories, maybe? Or one of our World War poets that we're looking at this week? Page 79 then. Out of the silence that followed, Mother made up her mind what had to be done. We didn't have any choice, she said. All that mattered was finding Big Joe, and for that we needed more people. She would go up to the big house right away to ask for the Colonel's help. She sent Charlie and me up to the village to raise the alarm. Now I can tell it's important because Mother Peaceful is going to go up and ask the Colonel for help. And while she doesn't agree with Charlie that he belongs down there, or she certainly doesn't agree that he should say that he belongs in hell, she doesn't like him. She doesn't respect him. She doesn't like the fact Molly's family do as he says. She only likes people who make their own choices. She sent Charlie and me up to the village to raise the alarm. We knew the best place to go was the pub, that half the village would be in the Duke in the evening. They were singing when we got there, Farmer Cox in full voice. Again, we've learnt already that he's somebody who likes drinking. The hubbub and the singing took a while to die down, as Charlie told them. By the time he had finished, they were all listening in absolute silence. Afterwards, not one of them hesitated. Again, here we're learning how popular Charlie and Joe and the family are. Not one of them hesitate. They don't worry about their drinks. They go and they help. straight away. They were putting hats on, shrugging on coats, heading homewards to search for their farms, gardens, and sheds. The vicar said he'd gather everyone he could in the village hall to organise a search around the village itself, and it was agreed that the sounding of the church bell would be the signal that Big Joe had been found. As everyone dispersed into the darkness outside the Duke's the name of the pub, Molly, and we can say it's the name of something because it's got that capital letter. As everyone dispersed into the darkness around the Duke, Molly came running up. She had just heard the news about Big Joe. It was her idea that he could be somewhere in the churchyard. I don't know why we hadn't thought of it before. It was always one of his favourite places. So the three of us made for the churchyard. We called for him. We looked behind every gravestone, up every tree. He was nowhere. All we heard was the wind sighing in the yew trees. A lovely bit of figurative language to finish off there. So we've got the idea of what's going. Now, the definition here given to you is a chaotic din caused by a crowd of people. So somewhere on this page, we learn that they have to go to a busy location, to the Duke. So there's a chaotic din caused by a crowd of people. What's the language point for that? Have a look round and complete that sheet, please. Now, according to the text here from the beginning, had Big Joe only mourned his mouse and Bertha, or had he mourned other animals? What do we think? We look at the section then where it's about Big Joe and burying creatures, and it says Big Joe always buried his creatures. Where Big Joe, and the fact it's always is a key word there, because always is important because it shows that the mouse is there, that Bertha's there, but the mouse and Bertha wouldn't be enough to say always, as this implies multiple burials. So that word always shows that it's many, many, many. You wouldn't just say always about two, okay? About two dead animals, you wouldn't really describe them as always being buried in one location. You'd need 3, 4, many, many multiple burials, okay? And I think that shows there. So that's that depth of answer we're after. Here you've got your additional questions, and what you've asked to look at is what Bertha, the Peaceful's dog, used to bark at. Putting those facts in the order that they happened. So Bertha got buried. People helped to look for Big Joe. Charlie asked if everyone went to heaven. Bertha was killed, and the vicar made the bells ring. Okay, did he? Interesting. Maybe one of them shouldn't even be there. Look at the section starting that evening Big Joe went missing on page 78, sorry. Where did the narrator go? So remember who the narrator is. Where did he go? And then you've got these 3 true or false questions. So did Charlie and Tommy look together for Big Joe? Was Joe waiting at Bertha's grave? And missing S there. Sorry about that. And Charlie, when he said he felt did he say that the colonel should go to hell, or did he say that he should go to heaven? Is that true or is that false for those? And again, then you've got the sheet for those ones to do on. Guys, I'm looking forward to reading your responses to that. I hope you're enjoying Private Peaceful as we're going through it, and I hope you're engaging with it. Remember, just back to the answer earlier, answer. You see the blue and the yellow writing on the screen there? We've got our point and we justify it with clear reference to the text, whether it's a page number or a direct quotation. Here we've got Big Joe always buried his creatures, and then we got the idea that we've got an indirect reference to the text with before making reference to it being the Bouse's resting place. So we've got that detail in our answers, and that's what we need in your answers as well, please, for numbers 1 and number 3, please. Okay. Number 1 and number 3 does need to be a 2-sentence answer at least. Thank you again for your attention, guys. Look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.